German Shepherd was chained to a sinking boat in a swamp by his owner. Then, a veteran appeared and did this. The first light of morning had just begun to bleed through the dense canopy over the Louisiana swampland when a fisherman's call crackled over the emergency radio. He had heard a dog screaming, then suddenly silent, somewhere in the thick reeds beyond the shoreline. Local authorities were delayed, and the area was too deep and tangled for easy access. But Daniel, a retired United States Navy veteran, out kayaking at dawn, caught the transmission as he paddled along a narrow channel nearby. Without hesitation, he turned toward the direction of the cry. As he approached, he saw it, a weather-beaten wooden boat, half-sunken and rotting, its hull nearly consumed by black water and creeping vines. One end of the boat tilted downward, already submerged. The other floated just high enough to reveal a shape. A German Shepherd stood at the bow, soaked to the bone, chained tightly to a rusted steel ring bolted into the boat's frame. The water had risen to his chest and was inching higher with every passing second, but the dog did not bark. He did not thrash or cry. He simply stood there, legs shaking, eyes locked forward, head held high. Like a sentinel on post, he made no move to escape, no sound of desperation, only the slow, visible effort to keep his chin above the waterline. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. This was not just a dog trapped in rising water. This was something else. This was loyalty, frozen in place. Daniel plunged into the swamp without thinking, his boots hitting the mud as he waded toward the boat. The water stank of decay, thick with debris. He reached the edge and grabbed the rail, hauling himself up with a grunt. The shepherd shifted slightly, acknowledging him, but did not back away. Daniel knelt and examined the chain. It had been looped twice through the metal ring and fastened with a lock, corroded nearly shut. He reached for the survival knife strapped to his thigh and sawed at the chain, his movements sharp and urgent. As the last link gave way and the collar fell free, Daniel expected the dog to leap away, to bolt, to collapse, to react. But the shepherd remained rooted in place. Even as the freed chain dropped into the water with a soft splash, the dog did not move. Daniel placed a firm hand on his side and nudged him toward the bank. "Come on, you are free now," he muttered, but the dog resisted. His front paw lifted, then lowered again, as if unsure. Then, startlingly, the shepherd turned back, toward the sinking boat. He leaned into the direction of the wreckage, body pulling against Daniel's hand, as though trying to return to where he had been stationed. "You are not going back," Daniel whispered, stunned. "You still think you are on duty." It hit him like a blow to the chest. The dog had not stayed because he was trapped. He had stayed because he believed he was supposed to, because someone had told him to guard that boat, because somewhere, deep inside the instinct and discipline drilled into him, he thought obedience mattered more than survival. The chain had not held him half as tightly as his own sense of duty. Daniel exhaled shakily. "You are not a soldier anymore, buddy. No orders left. No one's coming." He wrapped his arms around the dog and carried him the last few feet to dry ground. The shepherd did not fight. He simply rested his head lightly against Daniel's shoulder, eyes still fixed on the water, on the place he had been left behind. Daniel knelt beside him as the boat disappeared beneath the surface. In that moment, he knew. This was not just a dog abandoned. This was a comrade, discarded by the mission but still trying to complete it. And Daniel, whose own scars had never truly faded, understood something few others could. He was not just rescuing a dog. He was bringing a fellow soldier home. Daniel had not planned to bring the dog home. He had made the rescue, called the local shelter, and even offered to help transport the animal. That should have been the end of it. But when the volunteers arrived with their crate and leashes, the dog would not move. He stood at Daniel's side, soaked and silent, his eyes locked on the man who had pulled him from the water. Every time someone reached for him, the dog shifted slightly, closer to Daniel. There was no growl, no bark, no resistance, only that unwavering gaze. So Daniel filled out the paperwork. Temporarily, he told himself. Back at his small cabin nestled in the woods outside Baton Rouge, Daniel laid out a thick blanket near the fireplace, placed a bowl of water beside it, and set down a plate of shredded chicken and rice. The dog stood still, waiting. Daniel motioned to the food. "Eat, buddy, you earned it." But the shepherd did not budge. Daniel sat down across from him, watching. After a long pause, he spoke again. "You need a name." The dog blinked once, still standing at attention. "Bravo," Daniel said softly. "That was my squad mate's call sign. He never came back." The dog's ear twitched slightly. Over the next 2 days, Bravo did not touch the food unless Daniel issued the command. He refused to lie down indoors, instead sitting upright near the door, eyes fixed forward, body tense. He did not bark, did not explore the house. He stayed by the entrance as if guarding it, his posture too still to be casual. Daniel started noticing the signs, small but undeniable, the way Bravo responded to military-style commands, the hardened pads on his front paws, the scarring around his neck from what had once been a choke chain. Daniel had served long enough to recognize the bearing of a working dog, but there was something else, something broken beneath the discipline. He began to wonder, had Bravo been trained by professionals, or was he the product of someone using discipline without compassion? Some dogs were prepared for service, others were used for sport, aggression, even gambling. Either way, Bravo knew the language of control, but not of love. Daniel tried not to get too close. He had his own ghost to manage. His home was quiet for a reason. But Bravo was always there, waiting outside the bedroom door when he woke up, following him down the hallway, sitting by the porch when Daniel drank his morning coffee, like a second shadow. Then came the night when Daniel's past came roaring back. It started with a dream, loud noises, smoke, the crack of rifles. He sat bolt upright in bed, drenched in sweat, chest tight, heart racing. The silence of the room was deafening. He swung his legs to the floor, hands gripping his knees, trying to breathe. That was when he felt it. A weight, gentle but present, rested on his right foot. He looked down. Bravo was there, sitting beside the bed, head lowered, resting softly on Daniel's leg. He was not panting, not trembling, just watching. Daniel stared at him, overwhelmed. "You were a soldier too, huh?" he whispered, his voice breaking in the quiet. "You know what it is to be left behind?" Bravo blinked slowly and leaned in just a little more. After that night, something shifted. Bravo began to relax. He no longer waited for commands to eat. He began to lie down on the porch during the day, turning his face toward the sunlight. Occasionally he would nudge Daniel's hand, resting his head under it, asking, quietly, respectfully, for touch. Daniel changed too. He smiled more, spoke more. The silence in the cabin felt less heavy. The two of them, soldier and dog, had found each other in the wreckage, and without realizing it, had begun to rebuild something that had long been broken. Daniel had saved Bravo from drowning, but Bravo, in his own way, was keeping Daniel from sinking too. Spring arrived slowly that year, stretching out the days with soft air and warmer light. Daniel and Bravo settled into a quiet rhythm, one built not on rules or routine, but trust. Every morning, as the sun crept over the tree line, Daniel would open the door, and Bravo would already be sitting there, waiting. They walked together through the woods behind the cabin. No leash, no commands. Bravo stayed close but free, always circling back when Daniel called. always watching for the slightest shift in Daniel's tone or step. It was not obedience anymore. It was something deeper, mutual awareness. Neighbors began to notice the pair. An older couple down the road waved from their porch each morning as the man and dog passed. Children on bikes would pause, calling out to Bravo, and while he never ran to greet them, he would stop, sit calmly, and allow small hands to reach out and stroke his ears. Daniel saw it too, the way Bravo had changed. The sharp edges in his posture had softened. His tail, once rigid, now moved gently with the breeze. One afternoon, Daniel received an invitation to a regional veterans gathering, a picnic and support event held at the town park. It had been years since he attended anything like it, but something tugged at him. He and Bravo went together. The gathering was simple: flags, folding chairs, laughter, quiet reunions. Daniel stood at the edges at first, unsure, until someone approached with a smile. A former Marine, then another, a nurse who had served in Afghanistan. Slowly, Daniel allowed himself to belong. Bravo sat by his side the entire time, still and alert. When someone reached out to pet him, Bravo did not move but allowed it. Then a child, no more than 6 years old, approached timidly, holding a cookie. Bravo looked up, sniffed, and gently licked the cookie from the child's hand before lowering his head into the boy's lap. Everyone around them fell silent. That night, Daniel sat on the porch, watching fireflies blink between the pines. Bravo lay beside him, head resting on Daniel's boot. "You surprised me today," Daniel said softly. "You're not just learning to live again. You're teaching me how to do it too." It happened a few weeks later, on a warm afternoon in May. Daniel had been clearing brush from the side yard, a task he did slowly now, carefully. He stood up too fast. The world spun, and the next thing he knew, his knees buckled. He hit the ground hard, breath gone from his lungs. His vision blurred, his body suddenly weightless and distant. Bravo was at his side instantly. He nudged Daniel's chest, whined, then looked toward the house. The doors were closed. The road was empty. No one was nearby. With a sharp bark, Bravo turned and sprinted to the front porch, leaping at the door, pawing until it clicked open. Then he ran. The neighbor, Mr. Talley, was watering his garden when he saw the dog charging toward him. Startled at first, he raised the hose defensively, but then Bravo stopped, barked once, turned, and ran a few steps before turning again. It was unmistakable. He was calling for help. Talley followed, quickly realizing what was happening. Within minutes, Daniel was conscious again, lying on the grass, Bravo beside him, panting but calm. The paramedics arrived soon after. A sheriff's deputy tried to hold Bravo back, worried about aggression, but Daniel raised a weak hand. "No," he rasped. "He wasn't guarding the house, he was guarding me." The story spread through the neighborhood, and then the town. Articles were written. "The Dog Who Still Protects," read one headline. Bravo became a quiet legend, not for tricks or obedience, but for loyalty without command, for love not taught but chosen. Daniel watched the story unfold, grateful but humble. He knew the truth behind it. Bravo had once stood motionless on a sinking boat because he believed he was still doing his job. But now, when Daniel fell, Bravo did not wait for orders. He acted because he cared, because the man who had given him freedom had become the one worth protecting. This was not duty anymore. It was love. The lake shimmered under the afternoon sun, its calm surface broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the rocky shore. Families gathered beneath canvas tents and picnic umbrellas for the annual community camping day, a small but cherished event in their quiet Louisiana town. Children darted between the trees, roasting marshmallows and chasing each other with plastic water guns, while parents lounged on folding chairs with drinks in hand. Daniel had been invited by the local veterans group to speak briefly about service dogs and community care. He had not planned to bring Bravo, but several people had asked for him by name. The dog had become something of a local icon. Bravo lay at Dana's feet, near the edge of the water, his posture relaxed but his eyes always moving, tracking motion, reading energy, as if somewhere deep in him, a part of the soldier still remained. He tolerated the noise and chaos, the unfamiliar hands reaching out to pet him. He even allowed a group of children to tie a red bandana loosely around his neck. Daniel smiled, grateful as he watched his once silent companion now basking in a kind of soft attention he had once resisted entirely. It happened fast. A shriek tore through the warm air, sharp, high, and panicked. Several heads turned. Near the far end of the lake, a small boy, no more than 5, had slipped on a wet stone at the shoreline and tumbled into the water. In seconds he was pulled just far enough that his little feet could no longer find the bottom. His arms flailed, his mouth opened in a cry that was quickly choked by water. Chaos erupted. Adults screamed, some running toward the lake, others frozen in place. The boy's mother dropped her phone, her face pale with terror. One man dove in but was several yards away, and the child was going under. Before Daniel could even stand, Bravo was moving. The German shepherd launched from his resting place with sudden, explosive power. He tore across the shoreline and dove into the water without hesitation. His front paws sliced the surface, his body a focused line of motion. Daniel shouted his name, but Bravo was already halfway there. In less than 10 seconds, he reached the boy. Bravo swam behind him, dipping his head low, then rose beneath the boy's chest, lifting him with his back. The boy coughed, sputtered, grabbed instinctively at the thick fur. Bravo turned, paddled with powerful strokes, and pulled the boy back to shore, where several hands reached out to lift the child to safety. The boy was breathing, frightened but unharmed. Bravo climbed out of the water slowly, soaked and panting. He shook once, then walked straight back to Daniel and sat beside him, as if nothing had happened. His eyes flicked upward, calm and steady. Someone had filmed the whole thing. By evening, the video had spread. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded with messages of awe and gratitude. One headline read, "Once left to drown, now saves others from drowning." At a local press conference held 2 days later, Daniel stood with Bravo beside him and addressed the small crowd. "Bravo was trained to serve," he said, voice steady, "and then he was discarded, forgotten, left to die. But now he chooses to serve, not out of duty, not because someone told him to, but out of love. That makes him more than a hero. It makes him whole again." The crowd applauded. Bravo, silent as always, stood by his side. A dog once bound by command had acted from compassion, and in doing so he had saved more than just a life. He had completed his own redemption. In the months that followed, Daniel and Bravo became inseparable. Where one went, the other followed. They walked the same trails, sat on the same porches, and slept beneath the same roof. Not as rescuer and rescued, but as equals, bound not by circumstance, but by understanding. Together, they joined a local therapy program for veterans and children with autism, offering companionship where words often failed. Bravo's calm presence, once born from rigid discipline, had become a gentle anchor for those navigating invisible storms. At the community center, just inside the entrance, hung a simple wooden frame. On the left was a photograph, grainy but powerful. Bravo, soaked and skeletal, still chained to the rotting boat that nearly claimed his life. On the right, a recent image. Bravo in mid-swim, a terrified boy clinging to his back as they made their way to shore. 2 moments, worlds apart. One dog, one journey. Daniel never spoke much about the past anymore. He did not need to. People saw the story written in the way Bravo leaned against him during conversations, in the way his ears perked at the sound of children laughing. in the way he stood watch at the edge of the room, never tense, just present. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and cast its golden light across the porch, Daniel sat with a book in hand. Bravo lay beside him, his head resting gently on Daniel's worn pair of military boots. His eyes were half closed, bathed in soft amber glow, and across the screen, the final words appeared. He was never just a dog. He was a soldier who never stopped believing in orders, even when no one came back for him until someone did. Thank you for watching this powerful journey of resilience, loyalty, and redemption. Bravo's story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, love and purpose can still be rediscovered, and that sometimes the ones we save end up saving us right back. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories, where we share true, emotional tales of animals who inspire, heal, and remind us of the incredible bond between humans and our four-legged heroes. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us for more unforgettable stories that celebrate hope, courage, and second chances. Because every paw print has a story, and some leave a mark on the soul.
Two little girls, one burned house, and a German shepherd that refused to give up. The fire had already eaten through the walls when he arrived, paws slipping on ash, nose to the wind. Blaze wasn't born for comfort. He was trained for chaos, for danger, for the cry no one else hears. Inside that house, beneath collapsed beams and smoke so thick it choked the light, two girls waited. Twins, in tattered red sweaters, too scared to speak, too young to understand why the world had gone silent. Lucas Hayes, a patrol officer with more grief than sleep in his bones, followed the sound of a single bark into the inferno. He didn't know he was chasing a miracle. What began as a rescue would uncover a past buried in ash, a missing mother thought lost, a crime long forgotten, and a family waiting to be reborn in the very place it was broken. This isn't just a story about fire, it's about what survives it. Before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell. Because sometimes healing comes not with sirens, but with fur, memory, and the quiet loyalty of a dog who never leaves. The wind had a bite to it that night in Woodpine, Oregon, where the edges of fall had long crumbled into a raw, bitter winter. On the south side of town, old industrial homes leaned into the cold like worn-out men, roofs bowed, windows boarded, and chimneys long silent. The temperature hovered just below freezing, and the air carried a strange stillness, like the world was holding its breath. Officer Lucas Hayes, 37, sat in his patrol car parked along the edge of an overgrown cul-de-sac. He had the look of a man made for the job: broad shoulders, a straight spine, a face worn but not broken. His eyes, a dull green, flicked from mirror to mirror in quiet routine, but behind them lived a grief few could name. He hadn't spoken much since his wife died 4 winters ago, even less after their infant son passed from complications. Woodpine had been his retreat. The badge still felt heavy, but it was the only thing left that made sense. He sipped at coffee that had long turned cold, cradled in hands with knuckles rough from years of military service and nights without sleep. Next to him, curled on a blanket in the back seat, was Blaze, his canine partner. Blaze was no rookie. A 5-year-old German shepherd with a dark saddleback and rust-colored markings, his build was lean, almost lupine, with sharp eyes, one of which bore a faint cloudiness from a past injury. He moved with precision, even in sleep, and had the kind of watchful stillness that made strangers lower their voices around him. Blaze had once dragged a toddler out of a flooded basement. Another time he found a missing hunter buried under snow. His loyalty wasn't loud, but it was absolute. The night had been uneventful. Just routine patrols, one drunk, and a lost dog complaint. Lucas was about to radio dispatch to sign off when the static cracked alive, sharp and dry. Then came the voice. Faint, female, young, fractured between white noise. "Hello? Is anybody there?" Lucas sat up. The shift in his posture woke Blaze immediately. The dog lifted his head, ears turning forward. I'm really hungry," the voice quivered. "And the walls are moving. Mommy's not here." Lucas grabbed the mic. "This is Officer Hayes, Unit 12. We have a potential child distress. Can you trace that signal?" The reply came from Angela Marks, the night dispatcher. She was 52, round-faced, with a raspy voice from 3 decades of cigarettes and midnights. Her tone, while always cool, now carried an edge. "Working on it. Got it. 1458 Bramble Street, South Industrial Zone." Lucas blinked. That neighborhood had been cleared out years ago, entire blocks condemned when the sawmill closed. Bramble Street was a ghost town now, and if a child was there... "I'm en route, requesting fire support for possible structural hazard." A pause. "Negative, Hayes. Engine 2 is tied up at Eastwood Towers. Apartment fire. You're it." Lucas muttered a curse and turned the engine over. Blaze shifted in the back, alert now, nose pressed to the window. They arrived in less than 7 minutes. What met them wasn't just a house, it was a beacon of fire in the middle of winter rot. 1458 Bramble Street was already half consumed. The rear of the house an open wound of flame, roof caving in slowly under a sky the color of coal. Lucas killed the headlights and parked down the block. The power lines nearby hummed dangerously in the cold. Wind pushed waves of heat and smoke into the road. "Dispatch, fire confirmed," Lucas said, approaching on foot with K9. He slipped on his breathing mask, snapped Blaze's harness into a short lead, and approached through the side yard, the crunch of frost underfoot now drowned by the distant groan of wood and flame. The front porch was unstable. He didn't trust it. He turned toward the alley beside the house. Blaze sniffed once, then twice, then tugged, sharp, insistent. He'd caught something. "Go," Lucas said, and unhooked the leash. The shepherd darted around the side of the house, weaving through debris like smoke itself. Lucas followed, ducking under a low-hanging gutter past a collapsed trash bin until they reached the back entrance, a door half melted, barely hanging on. Blaze paused, nose twitching, ears pinned. Then one bark, high-pitched, direct. Lucas's stomach clenched. He knew that bark. "Anyone inside?" he called out. Silence. Blaze barked again, shorter this time, then he pushed his way in. The air inside was worse than outside, thick, unforgiving. Each breath tasted of plastic and insulation. Lucas kept low, sweeping his flashlight in a wide arc. Soot blanketed the walls. Bits of ceiling floated in the air like black snow. He followed the faint paw prints Blaze left in the soot, almost invisible. The dog's shadow danced ahead, tail rigid. They passed what had once been a kitchen. Charred dishes melted into the countertop. Then a narrow hallway where the wallpaper still clung to the walls in long, dripping strips. Blaze stopped suddenly, nose to the floor, sniffing fast. Lucas crept closer. "What do you smell, boy?" Blaze turned toward a door at the far end. A basement? Then the dog did something rare. He looked back at Lucas and growled low, not in fear, not in anger, in urgency. Lucas's flashlight flickered once, caught the glint of something under the doorframe. Shoelaces. Tiny ones. He didn't move further yet, not until he was sure. "Blaze, stay," he whispered. But Blaze didn't stay. The shepherd lowered himself and began to paw at the bottom of the door, deliberate, rhythmic, with a whine beginning in his throat. Lucas stepped forward. Then something behind the door shifted, a faint, high cough. Lucas inhaled sharply. Oh, God. Lucas pressed his gloved hand against the scorched door, feeling the warmth still pulsing through the old wood. The faint cough had stopped. Blaze stood beside him, head low, body tense like a coiled spring. The scent he had tracked here was no mistake. Lucas drew in one breath through the mask, raised his boot, and slammed it against the bottom hinge. The door cracked with a groan, splitting under pressure. A second kick burst it open, revealing a room half collapsed from fire damage. Smoke hung thick, but Lucas's flashlight cut through it like a blade, and there, barely visible in the flicker of orange and white, were two small shapes huddled together beneath a scorched dining table. Ava and Isla Carter didn't know they were about to be found. They had stopped hoping someone would come. The girl nearest to the edge, her sweater, a faded red, burned along one arm, turned her head slightly. She couldn't have been older than 5, maybe 6, and her cheeks were streaked with soot and tears. Wisps of blonde hair clung to her forehead. Her eyes, wide and glassy, locked onto Lucas's flashlight. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, with a voice barely louder than a breeze, she asked, "Are you the blue man Mommy said would come?" Lucas knelt down slowly. "I'm Officer Lucas. I'm here to take you home. Are you hurt?" The girl blinked. "My name is Ava. My sister's not waking up." Lucas shifted the beam toward the second child. Curled in the same position, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, was another girl, identical in every way, same red sweater, same tangled blonde hair, same small frame. But she wasn't moving. Blaze moved in beside Lucas, then did something unexpected. The German shepherd stepped forward, gently nudged the unconscious girl with his nose, then laid down beside her, pressing his body close. It was deliberate, his weight and heat acting as a shield, a buffer against the rising smoke. Lucas reached forward and checked Isla's pulse. Faint, weak, but present. "I'm going to carry you both out," he told Ava gently. Ava didn't answer right away. Instead, she stretched her small hand toward Blaze and whispered, "He's soft, like Mommy's dog, Daisy." But Daisy went away. The girl's voice cracked on the last word. "The fire. It came fast." Lucas looked around the space. The ceiling was beginning to buckle. Time was nearly gone. He lifted Isla first, cradling her against his chest. She was light, too light. Malnourished, maybe dehydrated. Ava stood, trembling on thin legs, and held tightly to the hem of Lucas's jacket. Blaze rose and pressed close to Ava's side, guiding her steps, body shielding her from the smoke as they moved. Lucas didn't go back the way he came. The structure groaned above them now, wood giving way. He needed another exit. His eyes scanned for light, an opening, anything. Blaze barked. Once. Then again, louder. The dog darted toward a hallway to the left, one Lucas hadn't explored earlier. Without hesitation, Ava followed. Lucas moved behind her, Isla limp in his arms, the air growing hotter by the second. The hallway ended in a collapsed mudroom. A door remained, partially open, warped but intact. Lucas kicked it. It gave way. Cold night air poured in like salvation. Outside, the wind had picked up. Smoke from the house curled into the starless sky, and sirens began to wail in the distance, late but coming. Lucas rushed out onto the frost-bitten lawn, dropped to his knees, and laid Isla down gently. Ava followed, kneeling beside her sister and stroking her hair with soot-stained fingers. Blaze stood over them both, chest heaving, smoke clinging to his fur. From the corner of his eye, Lucas saw something on Ava's wrist. A tattoo. No too small for that. A branding. Faint, but unmistakable. A stylized triangle, inside which curled the letters APX. His stomach turned. That wasn't a child's drawing. He remembered that symbol from an old case file. Project Apex. A suspected underground trafficking operation. The case had gone cold 2 years ago after a key witness disappeared. The symbol was rumored to be a mark and ownership code used by certain factions to tag victims. Lucas took off his jacket and wrapped Isla in it, then quickly examined Ava's arms. No other marks. But this was no accident. These girls hadn't wandered into an abandoned house. They had been kept here, or worse, hidden. The fire hadn't started itself. Just then, a battered Ford pickup screeched to a halt at the edge of the street. A man in his late 30s jumped out, heavy boots pounding the pavement. He wore a fire helmet askew and a soot-smeared parka. Kevin Morales, one of the volunteer firefighters who lived 5 blocks away. Stocky build, mid-30s, Latino, known for fixing everything from water pumps to his neighbor's gutters. "Lucas!" he shouted, rushing forward. "The station got your call, but Engine 2's still stuck on Eastwood. What's the situation?" "Two miners rescued. One unconscious, possibly smoke inhalation. Call for med evac. And Kevin—" Lucas turned toward him, voice lowered. "I think this wasn't just a fire. This might be Apex." Kevin paled. "Jesus Christ!" Blaze growled low, just once. Behind them, the roof finally gave in and the house crumbled inward in a deafening roar of collapsing wood and flame. Lucas didn't flinch. He only looked down at Ava, who was holding her sister's hand and whispering something soft. Blaze sat beside them, ears turned toward the fire, eyes watching the shadows. And in that moment, Lucas knew the story had only begun. The fluorescent lights in Woodpine General Hospital's pediatric wing hummed softly, their cold glow casting long shadows against pale green walls. It was early morning, but no one here had slept. The halls still smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt cloth, the remnants clinging to the twins' clothes now sealed in evidence bags. Lucas stood just outside room 204, arms crossed tightly across his chest, uniform still streaked with smoke. His hair, normally neat, was flattened with sweat and soot. Blaze sat obediently beside him, tail curled, ears perked, eyes watching the half-open door as if he, too, were waiting for permission to feel relief. Inside the room were two beds, though only one was occupied. Ava sat cross-legged on the white sheets, a hospital blanket wrapped around her small frame like a cocoon. Her blonde hair had been washed and brushed, revealing a sharp part down the middle. She looked older than she should, like she'd seen more winters than her 6 years allowed. A nurse named Becca Lorna, petite woman in her 40s with curly auburn hair pulled into a practical ponytail, stood near Ava, quietly checking vitals. Becca had a gentle, maternal way of moving, her voice always hushed but firm. She was known around the hospital as the calm in the storm, a trait sharpened by raising 3 boys alone after her firefighter husband died in a roof collapse 7 years ago. That grief still sat in her smile, but it had taught her patience. Lucas stepped in when Becca nodded. Ava didn't look at him right away. She had a plastic toy in her hands, a little bear with one eye missing. She held it like a lifeline. "Hey, Ava," Lucas said softly, crouching to her level. "How are you feeling?" She blinked once, then twice. "My sister's still sleeping." "She's safe," he assured her. "Doctors say she just needs rest." Ava looked down at her bear, then, without raising her voice, she asked, "Are you the blue man?" Lucas tilted his head. "You called me that before. Why blue?" "Because of your clothes. Mommy said if we ever got lost, look for the man in blue, with a dog." Lucas glanced at Blaze, who had quietly padded into the room and now lay beside Isla's bed, chin resting on the floor. The monitor beside her beeped steadily. She was breathing on her own. "Your mommy," Lucas said carefully. "What's her name?" Ava didn't hesitate. "Anna. Anna Carter." The name hit like a freight train. Lucas turned toward the nurse. Becca had already pulled up the system on the wall-mounted monitor. "I'll check the database," she said quietly. Lucas reached into his jacket and pulled out his department-issued tablet. He opened the missing persons archive, fingers swiping quickly. Within moments, he found the file. Anna Carter, 29. Missing since October 12th, 3 years prior. Last seen with twin daughters Ava and Isla Carter, both age 3 at the time. Photographs were included. Lucas turned the screen toward Ava. "Is this her?" Ava nodded without looking. "Mommy smells like cinnamon." Lucas swallowed hard. The case had been cold for years. No tips, no leads. Just a mother and her children, vanished. Until now. Meanwhile, Blaze remained at Isla's bedside. He didn't move, not even when a technician came in to check IV lines. But Isla did. Just slightly, her tiny fingers twitched, then stretched. Then, slowly, as if rising from underwater, her hand found Blaze's thick fur. She didn't open her eyes, but she curled her fingers into his coat and gently patted him once, twice, before her hand fell back limp. Lucas saw it happen. That's the first time she's moved on her own, Becca said quietly. Later that day, the girls were moved to a more private room under protective custody. Detective Harold Griggs, a tall black man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a stoic demeanor, joined the case. He wore a tweed coat, never smiled, and carried the weight of 2 decades in homicide and trafficking on his shoulders. He didn't waste time. I've got confirmation from state records. Anna Carter filed a restraining order against her former partner 6 months before she disappeared. Guy never showed up to court. Last known address was Phoenix. Lucas handed him the photo of Ava's wrist. She has a mark. Looks like branding. APX. Griggs stiffened. Apex. Son of a... I think we're looking at something bigger than just a runaway mother, Lucas said. These girls were being held. That house was meant to burn them with it. Griggs looked at him, and no one would have ever known. That evening, Ava woke from a nap in a panic. A fire alarm had gone off 2 rooms over when someone burned toast in the staff kitchen. Even through closed doors, the high-pitched squeal sent her into a spiral, screaming, flailing, gasping for air. Becca and Lucas rushed in to find her curled under the bed, hands over her ears. Lucas didn't speak. He lay flat on the floor beside her, slowly, carefully, until her eyes met his. "You're not in the fire anymore," he whispered. "You're here. You're safe. Blaze is right outside." She clung to his arm, sobbing, and didn't let go for 15 minutes. That night, Lucas stayed in the hallway outside the girls' room. Blaze lay beside him, half asleep but ever alert. Occasionally, Ava would peek through the door window and wave. Once, Blaze lifted his head and licked the glass from his side. She giggled. Lucas smiled for the first time in days. It was the 3rd morning since the fire, and the hospital room had settled into a kind of rhythm. Isla remained mostly quiet, her body healing faster than her voice. Ava clung close, speaking for both of them when needed. Blaze had made the corner by Isla's bed his spot, never barking, never pacing, just watching with those solemn amber eyes that saw more than most people dared. Lucas had returned early with coffee in hand and a notepad full of updates. Detective Griggs had called late last night. No new leads yet, but there were quiet rumblings from out of state about old Apex locations. Lucas had barely slept, and it showed in the lines under his eyes and the stiffness in his shoulders. Still, he stood a little taller every time Isla looked his way. This morning, though, something was different. Isla, still silent, had asked for paper. Becca, the nurse with the auburn curls and sun-damaged skin, had been surprised but handed her a set of crayons and a sketch pad without question. Becca was the kind of woman who never said no to children, partly because she believed in their healing power, and partly because her own daughter had stopped talking for nearly a year after a car accident. She understood the language of silence. Lucas sat quietly on the edge of the bed, sipping coffee as Isla lay belly down on the mattress beside him, crayons clutched in her tiny fingers. Her tongue poked out slightly as she focused. Ava stood nearby, fingers laced, watching with a strange mixture of awe and fear. Crayon strokes filled the paper black, then gray, then dark blue. At first, Lucas thought she was just scribbling shadows, but then the lines took shape. A square room with no windows, a bucket in one corner, a ladder that didn't touch the floor. He leaned forward slightly, heart knocking in his chest. "What's that, Isla?" he asked, keeping his voice soft. Isla didn't speak, but she moved the crayon again and drew a figure tall, looming, no face, just a hood, hands too big, a belt with keys. Then she drew 2 smaller figures. One had pigtails, the other an X over her mouth. Lucas swallowed. "Ava," he said gently, "is that you and Isla?" Ava nodded slowly. "That's the dark room. We used to sleep on the blanket. Sometimes. He forgot to bring food." Lucas stood, taking a photo of the drawing with his phone. "I need to show this to Griggs." Before he could leave, the knock came. The woman who stepped into the room was in her late 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with short-cropped silver-blonde hair and eyes the color of dried lavender. She wore a navy blue cardigan over a beige dress and carried a structured leather handbag pressed tightly to her side. Her name was Margaret Maggie Ellison, and she introduced herself with a firm but polite voice shaped by decades of private school etiquette. "Good morning. I'm sorry to intrude. My name is Maggie. I believe I'm the girl's aunt." Lucas froze. "We weren't told about any next of kin." Maggie's smile was warm but practiced. "I only learned about the fire this morning. Anna, my sister, we lost touch a few years ago after some unfortunate family disagreements. I'd like to speak to the girls, if that's all right." Lucas studied her carefully. She didn't look disheveled or emotional, more like someone prepared for an interview. No photos, no questions, just presence. Ava stepped back behind Lucas. Her fingers gripped the fabric of his jacket tightly. She looked at Maggie as if the woman were made of glass, pretty, clean, but fragile and unfamiliar. "I don't know her," Ava said softly. Maggie tilted her head. "Sweetheart, I saw you once when you were just a baby. Your mommy used to send pictures." She took one step forward. That's when Blaze growled. The sound was low, guttural, not angry, but warning. It rolled out of his chest like distant thunder, his eyes locked on Maggie's shoes. Isla, who had remained still for most of the conversation, flinched. Then, slowly, she reached for Blaze and touched his neck. It was the first voluntary movement she'd made in hours. Lucas didn't need more than that. "I'm going to ask you to step outside for a moment," he told Maggie, his voice now sharper. "We need to verify some things. Standard protocol." Maggie didn't argue, but her smile faltered for the first time. Outside the room, Lucas flagged down Griggs by phone. 20 minutes later, the detective appeared in the hallway, still in his brown tweed but now with a manila folder tucked under his arm. "She's not on the emergency contact list," Griggs said. "In fact, Anna Carter had no siblings listed in her missing person report, but we'll run prints to be sure." Lucas nodded. Blaze didn't like her. Griggs cracked a dry smile. "That dog's got better instincts than most people I know." Back in the room, Isla had finished her second drawing. This time it was a map, crude but clear. A tree, a fence, a road, a house underground. Ava said, "That's where we lived. Not the firehouse, the other place." Lucas took another photo. He knelt beside Blaze and ran a hand over the dog's shoulder. "You might have just saved them again." Blaze blinked once, then laid his head back down beside Isla. Outside the window, snow had started to fall. The fire at 1458 Bramble Street had been extinguished for 3 days, but the ground still smoked in places, exhaling the scent of char and ruin. The skeleton of the house stood in half collapse, black timbers jutting into the pale sky like ribs from a dead beast. Most officers had moved on, yellow tape curling in the wind, but Lucas Hayes wasn't done. Not yet. He stood outside the remnants of the house in full gear. Thick boots, fire-resistant jacket, gloves, and a filtered mask clipped at his side. The snow had turned gray here, ash mixing with frost. The twins' drawings haunted him. The dark room, the ladder, the hooded man. Isla's map, crude but unnervingly precise, had shown a tree with a scarred trunk and a patch of earth that cracked when it rained. Lucas had marked the spot on his phone. Beside him, Blaze moved with precision, his paws crunching softly over charred wood and icy dirt. The German shepherd had been restless since they arrived, nose twitching in the air like memory itself was calling him forward. Lucas trusted his instincts more than any piece of tech. A second figure approached from the sidewalk, squinting against the cold wind. Officer Dana Salazar, 31, short, sharp, and fiercely capable, joined Lucas with a thermal scanner slung over her shoulder. Dana had grown up in Woodpine, joined the force right after high school, and had a reputation for being blunt but unshakable. Her thick black hair was pulled into a bun beneath her beanie, and her breath fogged in front of her. "You're really going to dig in this mess again?" she asked. Lucas nodded. "We missed something." "You mean the fire marshals missed something," she said, though her tone wasn't mocking. "I heard about the map. Creepy stuff." Blaze suddenly stiffened and veered toward what had once been the eastern side of the house. Lucas followed, boots crunching through partially frozen debris. The dog stopped at a burned-out bush, sniffed the ground, and let out a low, purposeful bark. His tail went stiff, then he began pawing at the ground furiously. "Got something?" Dana asked, stepping closer with the scanner. Lucas crouched beside Blaze, brushing away ash and charred leaves. Beneath it all, the dirt was disturbed, loose, as if something had been buried and then quickly disguised. "Help me clear it," he said. Together, they uncovered a warped steel panel set into the ground, half covered by a broken rain gutter and melted shingles. The handle had melted, but the outline of a trap door was clear. "Jesus," Dana muttered. "This wasn't on any floor plan." Lucas pried it open with a crowbar, metal groaning under protest. A rush of cold, stale air rose up, thick with mold, and something darker something that clung to the throat. They shone their flashlights down. A short ladder descended into a concrete space no larger than a tool shed. The walls were water-stained, the corners dark with mildew. Lucas descended first, Blaze staying just above, waiting at the hatch. The moment his boots hit the floor, Lucas felt the difference. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was used. This was a room people had lived in, or hidden in, or been kept in. Against one wall was a moldy mattress, the fabric stained and ripped. A bucket sat in the far corner. Rusted chains dangled from a pipe along the ceiling. The air was thick with memory. Lucas's beam landed on something small near the wall. He crouched. It was a bracelet, child-sized, the kind sold in gas stations, pink plastic with white lettering. He turned it over. A. Carter. His chest tightened. He took a photo with his phone, then slipped the bracelet into an evidence bag from his coat. "Dana," he called up, "you need to see this." She joined him a minute later, her face hardening as she scanned the space. "They lived in here," she said softly. "Like animals." Lucas nodded. "Worse." Above them, Blaze barked once alert but steady. "Someone's here?" Dana asked, hand moving toward her sidearm. Lucas climbed quickly, but it wasn't a threat. It was Detective Griggs, arriving in his unmarked sedan. The older man looked windblown and irritated, a folder tucked under his arm, scarf trailing in the wind. "You two always play in burned-out basements, or is today special?" Lucas handed him the evidence bag. Griggs's eyes narrowed. "Well, hell." Inside the car, Griggs spread out the photos. The bracelet, Isla's drawing, the interior of the hidden bunker. "I spoke to the fire investigation team," he said, "and you're right, it wasn't electrical. They found accelerant near the rear wall, kerosene." "Someone wanted to bury this," Dana said. Lucas nodded. "And whoever it was didn't expect the girls to survive." Blaze climbed into the car behind them, resting his head on Lucas's thigh. Griggs looked at the dog, then at Lucas. "That shepherd's got a nose for trouble." Lucas glanced down at Blaze. "He's not just sniffing trouble, he's leading us out of it." The morning sun hung low and brittle above Woodpine, shedding no warmth, only light. The police station's archive room on the second floor smelled of dust, old paper, and forgotten things. The overhead bulbs flickered occasionally, as if even the electricity had grown tired of the stories held here. Lucas sat cross-legged on the cold linoleum floor, surrounded by open case files. The box in front of him was marked Missing Persons, 2019. The label was faded, written in black marker by someone who hadn't thought it would matter in 3 years. But it did now. He pulled out the thick manila folder labeled Carter, Anna, 10/12/2019. The first page was a familiar missing persons flyer. Anna Carter, age 29, Caucasian female, 5'7", slender build, long auburn hair, pale skin, dark eyes. Disappeared along with twin daughters Ava and Isla, age 3 at the time. No known vehicle, last seen near her rented trailer in the outskirts of Ashridge Pines, a town just over the county line. Lucas frowned. The flyer didn't mention what he remembered from an earlier report that Anna had contacted authorities 6 weeks before her disappearance. She'd tried to report something about trafficking, a group she called Apex. He flipped deeper into the file and found it. Incident Report, number 4221A. Officer on record, Deputy Shane Werner. Lucas read aloud quietly. Anna Carter filed an informal statement regarding suspicious activity at the Holloway freight yard. Described multiple children being loaded into a truck late at night, some sedated, some crying. Claimed she recognized one of the children from a nearby missing child flyer. No physical proof provided. No formal charges filed. There it was. 6 weeks after that report, she vanished. Lucas sat back, heart drumming. Her statement had been buried, classified as unreliable. The investigating deputy, Shane Werner, had retired early due to health issues, pancreatic cancer. Dead now. He stood and snapped photos of the relevant pages, careful not to damage the original copies. Then he returned to his desk and called Griggs. They met later that day at a remote site 10 miles outside of town, beyond the last row of streetlights and into the pines. The building was skeletal now, an abandoned transport hub that once belonged to the Holloway Freight Company, sold off after bankruptcy and reportedly unused since 2020. To the left, a rusted chain-link fence sagged under the weight of snow. Graffiti crawled along the walls, most of it vulgar and forgotten. Griggs had brought backup. Officer Max Kellerman, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, African-American, with a booming voice and a habit of calling everyone brother. Max had a background in logistics and had worked a few Apex-related busts downstate. He was methodical, cautious, and incredibly detail-oriented. Blaze sniffed the air before they even got out of the car. His posture stiffened. He jumped down from the back seat, nose already pointed toward the collapsed loading dock. Lucas followed the dog, Max just behind him. Griggs waited at the entrance, flipping through Isla's map one more time. Blaze weaved through weeds and cracked concrete, stopping suddenly near a rusted drainage grate at the edge of the dock. He pawed once at the snow, then again. Lucas approached and squatted beside him. "What is it, boy?" he asked, brushing snow and ash away. Something metallic shimmered faintly in the light. Lucas pulled out a handkerchief and lifted it, a small, gold hoop earring, its surface blackened with grime. The clasp was bent, but it still bore a faint engraving on the inside. AC. He immediately took out a sealed evidence pouch, bagged the earring, and marked the GPS coordinates. Griggs whistled low. "Could be hers." "We'll need DNA to confirm," Lucas said, "but it matches her name, and Blaze hasn't been wrong yet." They continued searching the facility, checking every rusted container, every empty crate. In one corner, hidden beneath a torn tarp, Max found a collapsed folding cot, stained and reeking of mildew. On the ground nearby were discarded food wrappers and plastic bottles, some recent. "This place wasn't just used once," Max muttered. Lucas looked around. This was one of their holding spots, a transit point. Griggs nodded grimly. Anna might have seen too much. That afternoon, back at the hospital, Lucas visited the girls again. Ava was coloring in the corner, Isla watching quietly. Becca had just stepped out to retrieve medicine, and the room was calm. "Ava," Lucas said gently, kneeling beside her, "do you remember the day your mom disappeared?" Ava didn't stop coloring. "Mommy told us to stay quiet and not open the curtains." "What else?" She heard the big truck again, the one with the screechy wheels. Lucas paused. "Screechy?" Ava nodded. "Like a scream, but metal." She said, "That's the bad sound. She told us to hide under the table." Lucas recognized that sound. Old freight brakes. Worn axles on heavy transport rigs, the kind used in moving goods or, in the case of Apex, moving people. "Then what happened?" he asked. Ava looked up. "Mommy kissed us. She locked the door. She went outside. I waited." Lucas kept his voice steady. "Did she come back?" Ava's eyes dropped to the drawing in her lap. She didn't answer. At evening, Lucas turned in the earring for DNA testing. He didn't tell the girls yet, not until he was sure, but Blaze, lying beside his chair at the station, lifted his head and stared at him for a long time, silent and certain. Lucas reached down and scratched the shepherd's neck. "We're getting closer, boy." Snow had started to fall again over Woodpine, fine powder drifting down like dust from the sky. The site at 1458 Bramble Street was now fully sealed, but Lucas had returned one last time, this time with Blaze off-leash, free to explore. Something still pulled at him, an itch in his chest that hadn't settled since the earring had tested positive for Anna Carter's DNA. She had been there, alive, not long ago. The remains of the house creaked in the wind. Charcoal timbers leaned like drunken sentinels, and the snow mixed with ash along the foundation. Blaze moved deliberately, nose close to the earth, each step slower than the last. Lucas followed in silence. They circled around the far edge of the property, past the haphazard trash heap and scorched metal siding. Blaze stopped at the collapsed shed behind the house, an area no one had thought to search. He sniffed once, barked low, then began pawing at a pile of warped planks and fire-damaged plastic bins. Lucas crouched, clearing debris. Beneath the trash was a slab of concrete with a rusted hatch set into it. Not listed on any diagram. No hinges visible from above. Just a faint metal lip and a heavy lock newer than the rest. Blaze whined. Lucas radioed Griggs, and within the hour, the detective arrived with Max Kellerman and a bolt cutter. The lock was snapped, the hatch creaked open, and a ladder led down into darkness. They descended one by one, Blaze first. The space below was narrow, not more than 10 feet across, and the air stank of mildew and something sourer like rusted blood and forgotten meals. A cot lay in one corner. A cracked mirror hung lopsided on the wall. A drawing was taped to the cement. 2 stick girls in red, holding hands with a black dog. Above them, a faint scribble of a woman with long hair, her eyes scratched out. Lucas's breath caught. "She was here," he whispered. "Recently," Max added. "Someone cared enough to lock it again." Griggs's phone buzzed. He answered, face unreadable as he listened. When he hung up, he turned to Lucas. "We may have her." They drove 2 towns east to Clearridge, a quieter, colder place where everything seemed a little slower. The hospital there, Clearridge Behavioral Care Center, was tucked into a wooded lot at the edge of town. It looked less like an institution and more like a forgotten farmhouse, faded green shutters, a crooked mailbox, and pine trees standing guard around it. Inside, the nurse who greeted them was in her mid-30s with soft, freckled skin and strawberry blonde curls pulled into a tight bun. Her badge read Callie Brandt, and her voice carried a Midwest softness that made every sentence feel like an apology. "She came in 3 weeks ago," Callie explained, leading them down a warm hallway that smelled faintly of lavender cleaner. "A trucker found her wandering barefoot near a rest stop. Hypothermic. Dirty. Wouldn't give her name. We brought her here under a Jane Doe file. She doesn't talk much, but she draws." She handed Lucas a folder. Inside were pages of sketches, some erratic, some detailed. But one caught his eye. 2 girls, both in red, one holding a teddy bear, the other standing beside a large dog, dark with pointed ears. Beneath it, written in shaky scrawl, "I saw them." Callie opened a door at the end of the hallway. The room inside was small and simple. A bed, a chair, a small window. Sitting by the window was Anna Carter. She was thinner than in the photos, her cheeks hollow, collarbones sharp beneath the hospital gown. Her hair was tangled but still long, strands curled around her shoulders. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a pencil and moved it slowly across a sketch pad on her lap. Her eyes were vacant, brown but dulled, as if the light inside her had been dimmed too many times. Blaze entered the room first. He stopped 3 feet from her and stared. Then he stepped forward, slowly, and let out a soft, questioning whine. Anna's pencil paused. She looked up. Her gaze met Blaze's. She blinked once, twice, and then her mouth moved. "Blaze?" Lucas stepped forward, voice quiet. "Anna?" She turned to him, blinking rapidly. Confusion flickered across her face like a glitch. I know you, she whispered. No, not you, but the eyes. Lucas moved closer. Your daughters, Ava and Isla, they're alive. Something broke in her face then, like glass finally fracturing. Her body trembled, and she let out a half-choked sob. I tried to protect them. They took me, they said, if I didn't shut up. Lucas knelt beside her. You did protect them. They're safe now, and they've been waiting. She reached out suddenly, fingers brushing Blaze's fur. Her touch was hesitant at first, then more certain. Blaze leaned into her hand. The dog had known her before she remembered herself. Later, Callie stood beside Lucas in the hallway, arms folded. We were going to transfer her next week to a long-term care facility. No ID, no records, no one claiming her. But I always felt like she wasn't just a patient. She was remembering backwards, through pictures. You saved her, Lucas said. Callie smiled faintly. No, that dog did. Snow blanketed Woodpine in soft silence, draping every rooftop and pine branch in a hush that felt sacred. The storm that had battered the town all week had finally passed, leaving behind clear skies and a crisp morning glow. Outside the courthouse, the American flag waved slowly in the cold breeze. Inside, a small courtroom held a hearing that would decide the future of a family once thought lost to smoke and silence. Lucas stood at the front, dressed in a dark charcoal suit that felt stiff on his broad shoulders. The fabric had never quite fit the man beneath, the soldier-turned-officer, the loner turned protector. But today he wore it not for appearances, but for a promise. Next to him, Blaze sat upright, freshly groomed, his black and tan coat gleaming beneath the overhead lights. His gaze didn't shift from the bench where the girls waited with Callie Brandt, the nurse from Clearridge who had become their temporary caregiver. Anna sat between them, her posture slightly hunched but her eyes alive with clarity. Days of treatment and grounding routines had begun to return her to herself. Her hair had been trimmed to shoulder length and neatly brushed, her cheeks fuller now with regular meals. She wore a simple blue dress, hands folded tightly in her lap. She hadn't spoken much since leaving the hospital, but when she had, it was always about the girls, what they needed, what they'd lost, and what she feared might never return. Judge Marla Kensington, a stern but fair woman in her 60s with silver hair pinned back and glasses perched low on her nose, read through the custody documents with slow, deliberate care. Known in Woodpine for her precision and empathy, Judge Kensington had once served as a family therapist before taking the bench. She studied Lucas from over the edge of her papers. You've petitioned for temporary custody of Ava and Isla Carter, she said. With the eventual intention of full guardianship? Lucas cleared his throat. Yes, Your Honor, with Miss Carter's consent, if and when she's fully recovered. Annie nodded faintly, lips pressed together. Judge Kensington turned to the girls. Ava, Isla, would you like to say anything? Ava opened her mouth first but hesitated, her fingers laced with Isla's tightly. Then something extraordinary happened. Isla stood up. The little girl, who had barely spoken above a whisper for weeks, took 2 steps forward in her red boots. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy braid, and her hospital bracelet still dangled loosely from her wrist. She looked directly at the judge. We want to stay with Officer Lucas, she said. Her voice was small, but steady. And Blaze, we don't get scared when they're there. A pause. Please. The entire courtroom held its breath. Ava sniffled, then added, Mommy says he saved us all, so maybe he's part of our family now. The judge blinked behind her glasses. For a moment, nothing moved but the steam from the clerk's coffee. Then she set down her pen. 2 days later, the courthouse issued a provisional order granting Lucas joint guardianship with Anna during her continued recovery, along with full residential custody of the girls. It wasn't a final ruling, but it was enough. That evening, the newly stitched-together family returned to the small rental cabin at the edge of Woodpine Lake provided temporarily by the department's emergency housing initiative. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, and creaky wooden floors. But it had a fireplace, warm light, and enough space to begin again. Blaze roamed the house with familiar ease, checking windows, corners, and finally curling up at the center of the living room rug. Ava placed a pillow beside him and laid down with her sketchpad, humming a lullaby her mother had started singing again. Isla stacked wooden blocks beside the fireplace, creating a tower that leaned dramatically to one side. Anna sat at the dining table, watching them. Her fingers traced the rim of a chipped mug. There was a light in her eyes now, faint but constant. She looked up at Lucas as he walked in with groceries and managed the smallest of smiles. "I used to think people like you only existed in stories," she said quietly. Lucas shrugged. "I thought the same about families like yours." Then Ava held up her latest drawing. It showed 4 figures on a hill, 2 girls in red, 1 man in blue, and a black and tan dog at the center. Above them, the sun smiled. Below them, flowers bloomed. On the dog's collar, she had written a single word: hope. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with trumpets or thunder. Sometimes they come quietly wrapped in a red coat, whispered from the lips of a silent child, or carried in the eyes of a loyal dog who never gave up. In a world where darkness hides in forgotten basements and broken memories, light still finds a way to break through, not by force, but through love, through faith, through one man's decision to care when no one else did. Lucas didn't set out to become a hero. He was just doing his job, but God often works through those who are simply willing. A burned house became a doorway, a dog's bark became a beacon, and what was once lost was found. Maybe in your life right now, you're walking through smoke, unsure where the exit is. Maybe the silence feels unbearable, but take heart. God still sends help. Maybe in the form of a friend, maybe a stranger, maybe even a dog. And sometimes you're the one He sends to help others. If this story moved your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that hope is still alive. Leave a comment if you've ever seen God's hand in small, unexpected moments. Type Amen if you believe in healing, in second chances, and in the power of love to rebuild what was once broken. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this, because the world needs more reminders that God is still at work, even in ashes. May He bless every viewer who watches, and may your home be filled with warmth, peace, and the courage to keep believing.